go ahead and get started. I'll kind of kick off. So this is the Central Park United Neighbors Safe Streets Committee, where we are focused on making it safe to walk, bike, and roll throughout the neighborhood, which I know is a goal many people on this call share. We try to provide, I think, a two-way dialogue between the city and our neighborhood and our community around this stuff. And I think one thing we've been really focused on at the start of this year has been really as DOTI starts to take on some really exciting initiatives like the 20 is plenty and the complete streets guidelines. We want to just educate our neighbors around what's going on and then provide a forum to, if you have questions about how some of these things will be implemented or just want to know more, give you a venue to kind of talk and interface directly with DOTI officials. So, I think because we only have an hour here, it might be great just to start with, David, do you want to just introduce yourself? And then if you have slides that you want to feel free to request to share, and I can make sure that happens for you. But do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself and kind of what your role is inside the city?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Brad. And thanks everyone for having me, and apologies for being a little late. So David Pulsipher, I'm the manager in transportation mobility planning with DOTI, and I've been with the city for about 6 years. My first position with the city was actually as a pedestrian, the city's first pedestrian planner. Kind of shocking that 2016 took us that long to have someone specifically dedicated to pedestrian issues. Then I led the team that does all of the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and I recently moved to a different position where I'm overseeing several of the different groups here on the DOTI planning side of Denver. I don't have a slide deck that I brought with me, but I do have different maps and resources that I can share if there's specific questions related to bike infrastructure or sidewalks or crossings. But I don't have any other agenda other than trying to answer any questions you have and maybe connecting you to the right people if you have questions that I can't answer.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, David. Yeah, I think, and I put in the chat before you joined, I think the guidelines for the complete streets. It's obviously a pretty weighty document, so probably not enough time to go through it here. But I'm curious, just for the group here who aren't, the nerds trawling through the DOTI website, looking at their different PDFs. Could you just give a brief overview of kind of what the complete street guidelines are and what they will apply to and versus what they won't?
Sure. So I'll rewind a little bit and kind of just briefly mention a few efforts that sort of created the necessity for the complete streets design guidelines. So 2017 was a big year for transportation in Denver. It was the year that the mayor released the mobility action plan, and the big picture items from that talked about a culture change in Denver and big mobility goals, wanting to change how much people drove basically alone in Denver. Right now it's about 70%, and wanting to get that down to about 50%, and increasing walking and biking and transit trips to 30% of all the trips taken in Denver. And some other goals related to carbon, greenhouse gas emissions, and safety and things like that. It was also the year that Denver finished the Vision Zero action plan, which if you're not familiar with it, Vision Zero very simply is this a concept that no fatalities on the roadway aren't a foregone conclusion, and that we don't have to accept them and we don't have to live with them as business as usual, but that we can live in a community where we try to eliminate all serious injuries and fatalities. So those two efforts kind of created a cultural, drive in how Denver Public Works at the time, and now the Department of Transportation Infrastructure are steering towards, sort of our North Star. And then in 2019, there was a comprehensive planning effort called Denver Right that did 4 efforts at the same time: Denver Moves Pedestrians and Trails, Denver Moves Transit, Game Plan, the Parks Plan, and then also the Community Planning and Developments Plan, of Blueprint Denver, which was a land use and transportation plan. And that effort, completing all of the efforts together, really identified this this gaping hole in guidance in terms of aligning the city's values with how the streets are designed. And currently, right now, all the way we have a very limited view of how new streets are built or retrofitted, and it's our standards and details, our transportation standards and details. It basically says there's 3 types of streets, and this is how you build them. And what Blueprint Denver did was identify that there's different kinds of streets based on the land that's around them. And then what the Complete Streets Design Guidelines did is provide design parameters around a street given the context of its surroundings. So, and then it also introduced 2 different new types of streets called shared streets and contemporary parkways. So that was an important, just as the document is important, the process for developing that document was even more important, because it brought all of the city departments together, everyone with a stake in the public's right of way, and got us to agree on some common values and common design parameters for how streets should be designed and function based on the type of neighborhood they're going through and the land use that's around them. So very big picture, it gives developers and city project managers parameters for how new streets should be designed. And it also created the necessary framework for the ultimate update of the standards and details, which is what we can actually regulate towards and enforce. And then that's the really critical part that the developers need to see things in writing before we can make them do things, and they have to be approved as city standards. So we couldn't just update the standards. We needed to flush out our values and details and put parameters around them. And that's what you find in the Complete Street Design Guidelines, and the reasons for how you make trade-offs given the context. It just gives you that the universe of knowledge a project manager needs to design a context appropriate street.
Thank you, David. So, to contextualize this a little bit more, say for like our neighborhood in Central Park, which has some parts that are, about 20 years old, and then also parts that are brand new, right? We still have homes that are being built. And I think, and I don't quite understand this completely myself, but, I have heard, like, for example, that some of the newer sort of homes and the streets that are being built to accommodate them, there's like some sort of like shared ownership of them between DOTI and like the HOA. I don't know if that's right. I'm probably mischaracterizing it, but can you just walk us through, how, these standards or kind of what is currently being in place, like what governs, how those are constructed now in terms of particularly in like safe streets infrastructure. So things like, striped crosswalks or things that sort of make sure people are, I guess, driving or using the street as it was intended to be doing, given the context.
Yeah, so the city has responsibility for maintaining anything in the public right of way, unless there's an agreement with like a business improvement district or a general improvement district. And typically that goes when the area or neighborhood wants to go above and beyond what would be standard or above and beyond what the city is capable of maintaining. So that could look like a landscaped median or landscaped curb extensions typically, or other street features that aren't standard in like the stock of things that the city maintains. But it has to have like a legal entity to interface with. It can't just be like, well, the neighbors really want this extra stuff, so I guess we're going to do it. It's typically we're bound around those types of parameters. Otherwise, the city is responsible for maintaining it.
Got it. Carol, are you raising your hand?
Right. Yeah. Can you expand when you say legal entity, what that means or entails?
Yeah, so like a business improvement district, someone who like actually has statutory ability and fiduciary means to maintain things and has like maintenance, has like contracts and, you know, staff and all of the necessary infrastructure to maintain it. It couldn't just be like a group of, you know, neighbors on a street.
The reason I'm asking because every time I travel, I note streets in Kansas City, or I was just in Phoenix or whatever, whether it's in a neighborhood or it's in a commercial area, just to get ideas if for no other reason. One thing locally that I've noticed is down, say, in the Curtis Park area, in some older neighborhoods, is that it's clear that neighbors have just gotten rid of concrete on corners and planted things. And they are taking care of it. So when you said that, one of the questions as you started to speak was, is redesign of streets possible given the limitations of how they were originally designed and how they function? But I have a son who lives in that area, and we go for walks, and I have just been, I don't know if stunned is the word, when I first started to see this. And then I happened upon some people one time who were in the midst of that. They were hauling away concrete and they were building a garden on the corner of their street. And they were taking the responsibility to do that.
Yeah, I mean, without seeing the specific site, I couldn't give you like a very precise opinion. You know, I will say that like typically people are responsible for the maintenance and the upkeep of their yard up until the curb line. And, you know, if people, it's very common for people to put things in the city right of way that belong to them, and then they maintain it. And it's typically doesn't become an issue unless it gets broken and the city has to, you know, remove it or something like that. But I would say that's not uncommon.
Okay.
Can we talk about things we talked about before you came on? Why are there no traffic, you know, speed limit signs? I live in the Beeler Park North End. We have lots of accidents on 58th Avenue, 3 last week. People speed right down there.
Yeah, so there's a standing city policy that, you know, the speed limit is, you know, X miles per hour unless, you know, 30 miles per hour unless otherwise posted, 25 miles per hour. So that's a very common thing in Denver. And they typically will install speed limit signs when they, you know, have a specific speed limit to enforce, or there has been an issue of, you know, speed related crashes and things like that. That's
Who does
something
one contact about that then?
So typically that would be probably our Vision Zero team, and I can, you know, give Brad a, you know, a list of contacts afterwards if you guys would like, or you can. That's something that's very and a very direct way to go through is also through the city's 311 system. Everyone has to respond to that, to those inquiries that come to them.
They haven't been very responsive.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, David, really quick. If you're looking, Susan, for speed enforcement, have you tried Officer Pollard, who covers he's the sort of the traffic enforcement officer for our neighborhood. I'll post
We rarely have seen a police officer in our neighborhood ever.
So this is one you can call, and he can set up a speed enforcement operation on a specific stretch of street. I've actually called him to do one in front of my daughter's daycare. Let me, in the chat, I'll post his contact information so you can see it.
That would be fun. It just blows my mind that people go 60 miles an hour. I can't tell how fast they go, but go. And there have been 3 accidents in the past 2 weeks.
So one thing that's kind of aligned to that issue is that there are certain through streets. So I live on Emporia Street, which basically runs from Central Park Boulevard through to Aurora and 25th, and it has become a pseudo commercial throughway. We call it the Stanley shortcut because Stanley Aviation and Marketplace is some of the primary, well, it's some of the traffic, right? We also get light industrial, and we had to lobby with the city to make sure that this was a, you know, or was officially categorized as a not for heavy trucks and that type of thing, because basically everything was getting routed through here via Google Maps and that type of thing. So that problem's kind of been solved, but we still have fairly substantial amount of speeding because it's a very clear shot, basically from Central Park Boulevard straight through to Aurora, and likewise, right? It looks like a quarter-mile drag strip, and people treat it as such. In which case, things like stop bars and painted pedestrian crosswalks might be a potential deterrent, because the stop signs are kind of invisible, right? There's a daylighting problem in a few cases, and there's, I think, 4 along the entire stretch, and it's got signage for the speed limit, right? As well as things like, warning, playground. There's 2 playgrounds lining this, little drag strip as well. So what are the basic criteria for getting stop bars and painted crosswalks actually installed? Is it a traffic volume? Is it an incident volume? Do we need to request another traffic study? Because the last one was done during the middle of the pandemic, so it was all low traffic.
Yeah.
What's the process there in order to put?
Yeah, well, we do have like sort of a flow chart for determining if a painted crosswalk is appropriate at a location. Typically, if it's right next to a school or a playground, that's an automatic qualifier. And if that's the case, then we definitely want to know about it. You do want to be judicious with them, because there are obviously problems and concerns with encouraging people to cross at locations where people aren't expecting to stop or yield, just the nature of the street. So you want to be mindful about that. So I would say again, the installing a crosswalk is a relatively basic procedure, and something that can be done with very little engineering and design. It just needs to meet the parameters for what would qualify. And again, it's something that can be examined through a 311 request pretty simply.
Okay, great.
So David, I wanted to ask a question that's along those same lines, which is, obviously everybody understands that there's a lot of resources that go into making streets safer, especially when you're retrofitting them versus building new ones. So, I'm curious to know, like, how are you all at DOTI sort of thinking about that? Like, you kind of gave a great answer there, which is like, if there's a piece of safe streets infrastructure that's needed near like a playground or a school, and it's, relatively low cost or simple procedure, like that seems like a no brainer. But, what should we sort of expect in terms of, in the future, how the city and DOTI sort of uses their resources to retrofit streets? Because obviously there's a lot of them, and it comes to this stuff. Is it kind of done just on a case by case basis, or would you see kind of how the different neighborhood plans kind of identify where like maybe there should be more protected bike lanes, like just an East Area plan that was done? What's the strategy or just thought process around that, given limited resources?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So to that, it's a complex answer. And I would say that the city has lots of different programs in the ways it touches and interfaces with the street. There's the Safe Routes to School program, which has prioritized all the schools in the city and has an action plan based on that. There's the Vision Zero program that focuses on our high injury networks. There's the bike program, which has basically divided the city up into different regions and is trying to focus on a region by region. There's the sidewalk program that builds things out. So there's not like one unified way. It really sometimes, and there's subsets of that, like the neighborhood traffic management program. Then there's just lots of different ways. So it kind of depends on what the improvement opportunity is, and it really just kind of depends, is the short answer.
Does anyone else have a question? Because I have another one, but if anybody else wants to speak up.
Well, our other concern in the north end is about the traffic lights to get on out of here, basically. Specifically the one at 56th, and I'm relatively new, we're new here, 56th and Galena and 56th and Dallas, to make a left turn to go like to the hospital or whatever happens there. And the traffic lets one car through, and people just keep rolling because it's a very long traffic light. When I talked to one of the people that my city councilman suggested that I talk to, he said, quote, well, with a development that size, that's all that's needed. And there's 2,400 homes in here and one car through. And the other place is if you're going on 56th Avenue in front of the high school, so you're going west and you want to turn left onto Central Park Boulevard, it allows one car to go through. And this is not adequate for a neighborhood this size.
Yeah, so a signal timing issue is very, actually a very simple thing to do if it's warranted. There's, again, a lot of parameters around that, but again, like if I would say this to anyone, like it's typically handled through a 311 request saying we need to look at this. And I mean, if you've gotten a response, I would love to know what they said, but if you haven't, they said
it's not warranted.
Yeah, well, I mean, I am not a signal engineer, but I do know that there's parameters and reasons for the why they make those decisions. And
yeah. I would just add, David, Susan, you might want to connect with Amy and Drew who are on this call, and I can make the connection for you after the call, but they actually had some success in getting the walk signal extended lengthwise for a street in the south end here. But they might be able to share some tips.
Well, the answer, one of the part of the answers I got was the people across the street. So on the south side of 56th Avenue have to get to the elementary school that's up the street from us. Well, that's all industrial. There are no kids that walk across that street. That was a dumb answer. It had nothing to do with the issue that we're trying to talk about. I'm glad I'm retired and we don't have to get out at 8 o'clock in the morning. I would hate to do that, but the line of traffic is really long to get out of here.
So is that also kind of a 311 request to have that signal looked at?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it has been looked at in that it doesn't meet the warrants. So, I mean, at least that's based on what Susan said. I haven't seen the response, but
I will say I don't know if it's the same DOTI traffic engineer for the south side of the neighborhood as the north side, but he's been typically very easy to communicate with, and like I've actually talked to him on the phone before, and he's explained things, through more than what they can write in the 311 response. So, Susan, we can talk about that offline. But it might be worth.
Yeah, but we've had it's very difficult to get the guy on the phone. I mean, 3 weeks it took me to get the guy on the phone.
I see.
David, could you put your email address someplace so that we can contact you, please?
Sure.
Well, I think while David's doing that, I think what I'd love just to talk about a similar topic is, David, your favorite part of answering these questions is speed bumps. Who gets them? What's kind of the thinking?
Yeah, for some reason your audio cut out there.
Oh, weird. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, you're back.
Yes.
Okay.
It cut out at my favorite part of talking to you is, and then
yeah.
Anyway, sorry. So we wanted to ask you about everybody. This is the universal first request for questions for you is the complete streets guidelines talk a little bit about speed bumps. What's the context? I had heard, I think maybe from another presentation you did, there's sort of like a pilot that will be going on soon, and we're all curious kind of what's the implications for the future of speed bumps inside the city.
So the good news is, we'll be piloting those this year. And, what you just would tell everyone is just, if it were up to me, they would be all over the place, right? It's not, but unfortunately, it's not that simple. We have other partners in the city that we need to bring on a little bit and convince them that the sky isn't going to fall before they go in. We do have some staff who've been involved in some large scale implementations elsewhere that kind of backfired, and they kind of gave us a sky is falling scenario. So we're trying to just be really deliberate around this, and especially like our street maintenance and street operations partners, and help them and train them and help them learn how are they going to maintain these things, how are they going to operate around them, how are they going to plow the snow around them, how are you going to teach people like me who helped out last year at the snow cyclone bomb, and I was plowing streets in Central Park, driving a pickup truck, that how are you going to teach me how to not rip those things up and destroy property? So there's just like some things that it takes to get everyone up to speed on this. I would say that the good news is that we are further along on other speed reducing and traffic diverting measures that could be looked at and examined before speed humps actually go in, like pinch points and chicanes and diverters that kind of planar jargony things, but basically things that make it less comfortable to speed and make you be a little bit more deliberate in your interaction with the street. So we do have a toolbox that's available. I would say we're still one of the things that DOTI, one of our core principles is making data-driven decisions. So we're not just going to like throw darts at a dartboard and guess where these go. We're going to put up some parameters around where they go. Most likely they'll be in conjunction with projects, what we would call a neighborhood bikeway or a local street that's being deliberately traffic calmed because it has good connectivity through the neighborhood, but has speeds that are higher than what we'd like to see. So in absence of other treatments, feeling like speed humps would be the best option in that scenario. So I would say that's the most likely candidates for speed hump streets are, streets that are also proposed as neighborhood bikeways at this point.
That's great to hear. We actually, if I can put a plug for it, we have at least it's been identified as a neighborhood bikeway for Uinta from Montview up to the Greenway. I would love to see that, mostly because I live there. I'm self-interested. Okay, that's great to hear. And I think, I saw some notes in the chat here, which is, we say this to every person from DOTI that comes on these calls, is like, we're always willing to be the pilot. We'll give you the political cover to implement those here in the neighborhood. So we extend that offer to everybody. So,
man, you guys are like the neighborhood unicorn. Yeah. What you guys need to do is go and move out to the other parts of the city, and get your neighbors on board. That would be really helpful.
Nice. Okay.
And we'll provide water and snacks.
That's right. Yeah. I have cheered on the contractors doing the protected bike lane on Central Park. I think they get a little weirded out after a while, but that's great. Okay. Any other questions for David?
Yeah, I got a couple that I posted in the questions area.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
All right, Dave, this for you. What's the criteria for a stop sign near a school, like distance?
Yeah, so typically, if you just took a generic school site, that was like a square, each of the intersections would be a stop signed intersection, unless it was by a collector that had another traffic control, like a signal. That's the typical standard. And then building out, like extending beyond that, you wouldn't put a stop sign closer than 300 feet to the nearest intersection or other design. So it would kind of like expands out from that. But ground zero, the site, all of the intersections directly accessing the school site should be traffic controlled either by stop sign or a traffic signal.
Well, the reason why I asked that, because I live near a school on 26, and they only have the stop signs around the school, but I'm only a block away. And 26 is a very heavily traveled road for pedestrians, bicyclists, and cars. And I've been fighting that for quite a few years, and I'm kind of frustrated to get a stop sign at Juliet and 26.
Yeah, I would say if you haven't been given this context before, the backstory on that is that what happens in the danger of putting a stop sign too close to another stop sign is that you start to get really bad issues with compliance, and people get frustrated. And it's unfortunate we have to like engineer to bad behavior, but people see multiple in a row and then they just start rolling through them. So it actually decreases the efficacy of a stop sign when you put them too close to each other. So that's why there's some distance parameters around that.
I agree with that, but this block is very long. It's probably 300-400 feet, maybe a little more, probably more. But if you notice what Aurora did, they put a lot of stop signs on 25th Avenue, which moved all the traffic to 26. And they put it at like every street just about on 25th up near this area here. So it's just a thought. And it's frustrating. I also had a couple other questions about bike lanes. Since the one on 26 is along the curb, can that be moved out to the street? Oh, I'm sorry, it's out in the street. Can that be moved in towards a curb?
Let's see. Let me see which one. What are we talking? Or 26th?
26th Avenue, yes, East 26.
Let's see here.
So Brian, you're like suggesting like what they're doing on Central Park Boulevard, where they're making a protected bike lane where the
Yes.
bike lane is near the curb and then the parking lane is near the
Yeah.
driving. Yeah.
Yes. Because a lot of people won't use the bike lane because it's too dangerous, or use the sidewalk instead. So for riding their bikes.
Yeah. So
Also unique in that it used to be a runway, right? It was the east-west runway.
It is
26.
now.
Yeah, and it
cars.
definitely, now it's a drag strip.
Oh yeah, it's getting worse too every day. I mean, it's horrible.
yeah. So I would say typically we have some parameters on how we make that design decision in terms of when a bike lane is right next to the curb versus when there's like a protective barrier in between it. Now, in a perfect world, all of the facilities that we have on the street would match up with our standards today. But the reality is sometimes we have to wait for a street to be resurfaced before we can upgrade the facility to meet the standards of which it would today. So that does result in some streets that have a bike lane on the curb now, but in the future, they would be separated by parking or a bollard or a concrete median or something like that.
Or
So
we're just looking at cars protecting the bike lane, really.
Yeah, so it's sometimes not just as simple as a flip flop, because then you have to get our equipment in there, and we need, on top of like the parking, we need a buffer. So it's actually, we need a little bit more space to get everything in there. So if it were easy, it would be awesome and we could just flip them, but it typically requires us a little bit more space so we can get equipment in there and to maintain it. So that's another issue as well.
Is that the preferred design for street and bike lane designs at this point going forward? I noticed they did a retrofit on Prairie Mountain Parkway or Prairie. Yeah.
Prairie Meadow Park.
Prairie Meadow.
Yeah, it's a good question, Andrew. I would say here, I'm going to pull something up real quick. Share screen. It says it's been disabled. Do you trust me, Brad, to steer the ship?
Yeah, sorry. Hold on now, I gotta find it. Where's your name here? It's weird. Let's see here. It's not letting me designate you to share your screen.
Okay. Okay. Well, maybe this is something I could just share afterwards, but basically we have like an XY matrix that plots volume of cars on the road versus speed. And, wherever, that fits, that kind of guides us in that direction. So I would say in some streets where you have lots of cars and high speeds, absolutely, yes, that's, the best practice is to put protection and a separation because that's, more comfortable. But on some streets, that's not necessary at all. Like on a low volumes, low speed street, you just need some signage, wayfinding, maybe some better crossings and some things that might divert non-local traffic for a really comfortable experience. So it really just depends on, what's observed on the street.
So would a traffic study be the first step in that, or is it?
Yeah, usually, yeah. And not even necessarily traffic study, just a very simple recording speeds and volumes, throwing down those tubes you see on the roadway that people run over helps us get a big majority of the information. And then also too is looking at parking utilization. That's another issue, and where, kind of comes up with one of the things that was mentioned earlier is that in some instances, in order to get the ideal facility, it means removing parking on one or both sides of the street, and then you're opening up the whole another can of worms. So
right, absolutely. Well, 26th is a fairly wide and heavily trafficked thoroughfare within Central Park. I drive on it multiple times per day because it transits basically east-west for the access out to the north end of Central or MLK, connecting into Aurora and Fitzsimmons and whatnot, and then all the way down through to the Stanley and the other areas like Bill Roberts Elementary and of course reconnecting to MLK also. So
I wonder if you could comment about the excessive number of traffic lights on Central Park between 56th and I-70. There are 13 of them. And to get across the bridge, no, seriously, to get across the bridge, and those of us who live up here noticed that at the corner of 46th and Central Park going south, so that the people can get out of, I assume, whatever they're building on that corner. There's going to be a traffic light that will, when somebody comes to that corner, tries to come out, it's going to stop the traffic going on Central Park. I mean, sometimes it takes us 40 minutes to get home from like Sprouts to my house during the rush hour. The traffic lights are totally untimed and
well, I can definitely tell you it's not that they're untimed. There's a ton of thinking that goes into it. It's just that, you're trying to balance the traffic at the busiest time of the day. So everybody loses in that scenario.
I know, but what happens when that? So every time somebody comes to that little tripper, all the traffic on Central Park is going to stop so they can get out. Why?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of engineering behind the timing of the signals, and typically people. I'm not pretending that I understand all of it either, but I know one of the major core principles behind traffic signal timing is one, balancing people's safety with balancing people's convenience and wanting to get people through as efficiently as possible, but not at the expense of people's safety. And when you're trying to drive at rush hour, you're really, getting to that pressure point there.
I'll just put a plug. If it was super easy and safe feeling to bike over that, biking is definitely would be the way to go. And it's not too bad right now, but crossing those freeway entrance on ramps, right in that place where you're talking about, Susan, on a bike is a little bit like.
Yeah, but I have to take my kids to soccer practice, my grandchildren to soccer practice from.
Yeah, but I mean, if more people
I can't bike with them.
If more people were biking, you might not have to wait in as many cars.
Sorry, my biking days are way gone. Thank you.
But that little sequence right there is it does seem excessive. I mean, I believe the one that got added is where they're going to put the In-N-Out burgers. So I would anticipate it's going to be heavily used. But there's a sequence of 3 lights inside of what you would consider a single city.
2 blocks.
Yeah. Well, there's 4 within 2 blocks, right?
Yep.
So
there's 13 altogether.
Yeah. It's a little crazy when I saw them putting that one up. I'm like, okay.
So we have about 9 minutes left. Does anyone have any other questions for David? And I'll also put a plug in for David, if there's any takeaways you'd like for us to kind of think about when it relates to these complete street guidelines for Central Park, we'd love to hear those as well. But either way, David wants to go first, or if anybody else has any burning questions for him.
Hey, Dave, I have one more question for you. When you said put out those tubes for the traffic count or whatever you do we go through you to request one or is someone else?
It really depends on what the nature of the request is. Typically, you would be like, hey, I want you guys to do a traffic study. It would be like, tell us the problem you're experiencing, and then we would try and figure out what the right data to collect would be.
Well, that's what I'm requesting on 26.
What's the problem?
It's a heavy traffic, the speeds, the bike lane switching over and all that stuff. So.
Yeah. I mean, in that case, it would, I would say like it's a traffic safety inquiry. You're worried about the, safety and speeds on. So.
Yeah, put it at Juliet and 26.
So Brian, you can also ask DPD to do a speed study.
I've done that, and they came at the lowest traffic time of the day. When they did it.
They didn't do it over.
Yeah. So for us, we do it over the course of a week, capturing everything. So
you're talking about for the tube, yes. But when Brad mentioned about DPD,
sure,
they did it at the lowest traffic time of the day for enforcement.
Well, mine might have been different, but we did ours on 23rd Avenue, and they had it up on sort of they had like a speed feedback sign and kind of the thing that was counting, measuring speeds and traffic counts. They left it up for, I think, a good 4 or 5 days, but I don't know, maybe worth trying again. I don't know.
Yeah, they did it for an hour and a half.
Yeah, that's not enough time. Yeah.
I agree.
Anything else? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I want to say thank you, David. We appreciate you being willing to, throw yourself on the grill here, and you provided a lot of great information and resources for us. So we appreciate it.
You guys are very kind and not scary or mean at all. So my pleasure.
Got us on a good day.
Maybe don't invite me on your bad day, please.
Oh, okay. We'll keep that in mind.
Well, thank you, David. We'll make sure everybody, if you have any materials, besides sort of the complete streets guidelines that would be worth us just checking out or deepening our understanding of this stuff, happy to pass those along. And but yeah, we really do appreciate you coming out and talking to us.
No problem, guys. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, David.
Nice meeting you all.
All right, take care.
Thanks for arranging this.